So, hello and welcome back to another Improvement Season podcast. It is the Naked Man this time, with a mustache though. I think it's a little bit odd, but it's me, Pascal Steve, and on the other end it is Steve Hall. It's just so freaking warm in here and also very humid here today. That's why I need to do it a little bit half naked. Guys, don't worry. I'm still wearing my boxer shorts here, so I'm not completely naked. So with that out of the way, Steve, how are you doing?
Don't put that image into my head, Pascal.
And the naked Pascal. Yeah. I mean, you've seen him already.
So did all the. I was going to say. So did all the spray tanners, and everyone saw that. So, to their surprise or shock in some instances. Although, I mean, I don't know what they seemed surprised at the time, didn't they? But surely they've seen a lot back there.
I mean, I've been living in East Germany for a while, and it's quite common. I don't know. Have you ever heard about this, Steve? That so the eastern part of Germany, they had beaches. It's called FFK. So you can
like nudist beaches.
Exactly, and it was very, very common in the eastern part of Germany back in the day. And I've been living in Berlin since what is it now? I don't even recall anymore, 15 years now. And maybe it has now trickled down on me that I enjoy it. And also, I'm getting older. I have the feeling that when you're getting older, you are more so in alignment with your body and don't give a shit anymore. And then it's just let's be naked, you know?
I was going to say, last week was you talking about how much you've grown with your kind of, your relationship with your body. And now this week it's like, hey, guys.
Taking the next step very quickly. It's kind of an acceleration.
The number of times I've been tempted to do podcasts topless because it's really hot. And instead of being topless, I just end up sweating.
Yeah. I was very much contemplating on actually doing it this way because I find people who do this, it comes across a little bit unprofessional, but let's be real here. The Improvement Season doesn't really scream professionalism anyway with everything that we're talking about. And I was just like, come on, let's just do it this time. It's absolutely all right. People will understand. It's not that we're doing it all the time, but I do feel like one of those people who are 19 to 21-ish, wearing kind of a very, very basically transparent stringer in the gym, shouting, throwing the weights around, taking TikTok videos. This is how I feel right now.
Now I want to peck dance.
I'm not the best in something like this, to be honest.
Oh no!
I've said it to you. I'm a motor moron when it comes to my packs.
Oh yeah, it's
more
true.
So.
What was I going to say? On the note of professionalism, I think I've done it a few times where I've done topless check-in videos for clients, but I always feel like I shouldn't. But it's I'm a bodybuilder. Being completely topless and naked is pretty normal, right? Mm-hmm. But for some reason it feels really inappropriate. So if I've done that, I normally change the camera so it's just my head, and I'm sorry, it's a weird angle. It's way too hot.
I mean, there was a time YouTube entertainment educational channels back in the days. What is it now? It is close to 10 years now, right? Yeah. When the first kind of YouTube channels arose. And most of them were kind of topless. And you probably recall that very old guy, Scooby.
Yes.
He was always topless. I think he still is.
He's still topless and tanned as fuck. Because when I started this channel, if you look back at some of those videos, I definitely played into that as well, where I was oh yeah, I'll try and do some of these videos topless and they'll get more views. Little did I know that when you're not particularly jacked at all, which I was not at all back then, it's not particularly impressive.
It's funny, Steve, I don't know how it is with you, but whenever I'm on holiday, I'm never taking off my shirts in public. Even though that probably, if you really think about it, someone like you could very much pull it off and be actually quite impressive to other people around you. And weirdly, or the irony in it is that most of the time, those people don't take off their shirts in public. Whereas then other people who may not have the best physique, they don't care and give a shit. And they are just walking around topless. And I find it cool to some extent. I would love to have that kind of confidence where I'm just I know that I don't have the most impressive physique, but I don't give a shit. And I don't know how it is with you, Steve, when you were on holiday, because the last holiday, it was just a short weekend trip that we've been away. it was also there very warm, and we've been kind of driving around with kind of a quad, but the quad was self-driven, so you needed to pedal. So Katie and I, we were sitting in the front, we needed to pedal, and it was very, very hot. And it was the first time ever, honestly, ever, that I took off my shirt in public and I felt all right with it, because I was also then pedaling and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know how you feel about it. Are you walking around kind of topless when you're on holiday and stuff like this? And how do you feel about it? Because I don't know, it makes me feel like a douche walking around topless in public.
Yeah. So I do definitely feel a little bit like a douche, but I do it. And I used to not, but I'm still picky about the situations. Like, I don't know, if you ask the person who like would freely take their top off at any opportunity, like any time, and they were like, man, you, compared to them, we're comparatively jacked. They'd be like, man, if I was you, I'd be naked all the time. Like, I'd just be showing it off every time I could. Whereas I'm like to the side of, if there's an opportunity to take my shirt off, like if it's very, like we're on a beach, I'll definitely do it. But if it's like in a situation where it's like, yeah, it's not completely like normal to do it, but some people are, I'm less likely in those situations. Like you'd think the more jacked you are, the more likely you would be to want to go, like to want to be topless and go topless. But actually it's like almost the opposite, where it's like the more jacked you are, the less you feel comfortable doing it. Although
that's what I mean.
I don't know,
the
more you've been lifting, I don't know.
Yeah, the irony in it is just so strikingly weird to me, because you're clearly training, you have clearly a better body composition than probably 95% of the people out there, and yet you feel uncomfortable doing something like this. To be fair though, whenever we then got off the bike, I immediately put on a shirt. So for example, to have an ice cream or so, because it's just not for me. I still don't feel comfortable in a situation like this. Even though that we've talked about confidence in your own skin like the last week, it's definitely improved. But in public, I don't know. I don't need to go into a store kind of half naked.
I did when we were in Tenerife last. Like I went into some shops and stuff. It wasn't, if it was like weird to do it, I wouldn't do it, because it was like, it's like
in London,
resort.
walking around in London topless.
People do it like on the high street. People just wander down there topless. But I'm like, nah, I don't know. It may be if I'm in a park and we're sat for a long time and I'm sweating, like maybe I'll go there, but I'm with you on that.
But Steve, let's be real here. You're never actually in a park sitting down.
Very rarely.
I hated that. I don't know how you are with situations like these. I never understood why people enjoyed sitting down in the park. It's uncomfortable. I can't sit on the floor. And then doing nothing and just hanging out, it was never really for me.
So I do it sometimes, but not of choosing. Charlotte really enjoys it. And I don't know why. She just enjoys it. Like if we're going out on the weekend, we went to Oxshott in Surrey, and we're like having a picnic there, and she would always pick to like sit on the grass. I'm like, there's a bench there. This is made for sitting. Why would we sit on the floor when there's a bench? I'm the same as you. Like, I just get uncomfortable. I have to stand up. I'm like, I'm not sitting here with you. I'm going for a walk, something like.
Don't know what it is. Also, with walking around barefoot, it's also not for me. I always need to wear shoes or anything. I don't know what it is. So maybe we're the weirdos. Probably we are the weirdos.
Barefoot in your house, though, right?
No, even there, I'm wearing Crocs.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what it is with me, my feet, and the ground underneath. I feel it's uncomfortable.
You never owned any Vibram 5-finger barefoot shoes?
Oh, no. Probably also because I have flat feet, and it's just painful after a while. So that could also very well be the reason that it's just like subconsciously just uncomfortable.
When I see people with, this is a complete weird tangent, but this is the improvement season. When I see people with like no arches and really flat feet, it like kind of freaks me out. I'm like, wow, like your feet are literally just splat on the floor.
Yeah, like, you're a duck. You're basically a duck.
You are. It's just like you're wearing flippers. That's what it looks like to me. But if you have bigger, you probably still have bigger calves than me. I don't know. What am I trying to say? I don't even know. But I've got the Lewis Hamilton monster today.
Yes, this is something that I wanted to discuss as well, Steve, because I had my first Lewis Hamilton monster on the weekend, basically nearly at the same time as you did. How do you find it? What's the rating out of a 10? Where 10 is the best, of course.
Yeah. maybe 6, 7, something like that, I would say. It's not my favorite, but it's not my least favorite. And I would say, I don't know what my least favorite is off the top of my head, but it's definitely not in the top 3, I would say. So it's all right. It's decent. I can drink it.
I can tell you what my least favorite is because I hate it. I needed to actually pour it away. And I think that I even discussed it on the, I even discussed it on the Improvement Season podcast. And that was, it must have been on the 4th of August, 2021. I'm not kidding. I'm not
what
kidding.
What
time? And it was the mule version.
Oh, the ginger beer one. Yeah.
Oh, disgusting.
I bought that once.
I just know it because we've been on holiday during that time, and it was right before my birthday. 5th of August is my birthday. Now everyone knows it, and I bought those because it was the first time that I saw those in a shop, and I thought I need to give it a try. So it must have been somewhere around kind of there because it was also a shorter stay. So and it was disgusting. It was the first time that I needed to pour that drink away. And the Lewis Hamilton version, it was also kind of 6 out of 10. It's as so often just too sweet for me personally.
I agree. The mule, actually, I said I didn't know my least favorite. I think it's probably the mule. It's like, it's not throwawayable for me because I do like ginger beer, but it's just like, this is basically a ginger beer. Yeah. I'm like, I would never pick a ginger beer. It's fine. But when I have a Monster, I'm like, I want something, I don't know, a little bit different, a little bit more tasty.
Yeah.
What's your number one?
Have I asked before? It's the watermelon.
Watermelon,
sure.
Yes.
Yeah. There was a time when we've been in Brisbane with recording things. There they had the cherry one. And ever since then, I haven't seen that one again. It's a black with kind of a red
I know the one.
hem. And that one was also great. It kind of reminded me of Cherry Coke to some extent. And that was
Bristol.
Yeah, Bristol, exactly.
I was like, Brisbane.
It was in Australia.
We're in Australia.
Yeah. Sorry for that.
I'm terrible with locations, so I was like, man, I'm not going to be able to work out where you mean. But then I was like, yeah, Bristol.
Sorry for that, yeah.
That one, I need to try it again because it's not very common. But when I first had it, I was like, I expected to really like it because I tend to like cherry a lot. But watermelon's definitely right up there for sure.
Yeah, I've never seen it again ever since, to be honest.
Weird. Yeah. It's like the original one is very rare too. Like you barely ever see that one.
Yeah, it's gone missing, unfortunately. Anyway, Steve, talking about you brought something up about calves. So let's delve straight back into training. How are things going? How are things on your end in regards to your calves? Are they growing?
I can talk about calves. So actually, one of my clients taught me through how he's taking some of his measurements because I think we both are on a bit of the same page here where measurements, we take them with a pinch of salt. There's quite a lot of human error that can be involved, especially over the shorter term. And we have this recommendation, I forget what it's called. I think it's like a myo tape in our handbook that we recommend people where they can put it round and really clip it in so it can be kind of as precise as possible. And he described this one he's got, which I think is by the brand Renfo, which is what my scale is actually, where it's like Bluetooth. And it's the same setup, but it has a button on there. So when you measure, you can wrap it round and then press a button. So you don't even have to take it off and read it or anything. And then it sends it straight to your phone into the app. And I was like, hell, that's pretty precise. Like I can see that the human error involved being much less, especially if you can, make sure you always measure in the same location, which is challenging at best.
You know what would be great now that I'm thinking about it, because it is great. I have never heard about it, but if it had, but it would be too expensive, I think. If it had some kind of measuring tool to measure the pressure that it applies to then the circumference, right? So that it can always, so that the pressure that you're applying is always the same. And by that, the accuracy is even more so elevated.
Yeah, that's a good point, because that's something people do. It's like, how tight do you wrap it round and like all of that? And you try and convince yourself that, last time I didn't wrap it as tight, so I was keeping it as loose as this time. And that can be centimeters if you want it to be.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, just on that note was because like I haven't measured my carbs I haven't taken personal measurements in the longest time because especially when you're an advanced bodybuilder, like the amount we're growing to the human error rate is like, you'd have to wait years for there to be any like real substantial change in those, unless it's fat loss. Waist measurements, they're much more useful, but like measuring for muscle gain. So yeah, with my calves, I haven't like measured them. And I think I said last time, I'm getting the best like in-session proxies that I've ever had in terms of like the disruption I'm feeling, the kind of mind muscle connection, the pumps. Like sometimes my calves, like it just feels like I get almost skin splitting pumps in my left calf in particular, because that's the bigger calf where I'm not a motor moron. The right calf, I'm a bit of a motor moron. And yeah, at the moment I'm training them, I think 5 times a week. I don't know if I mentioned that last time, but yeah, I'm doing all length and partials on them. So I just do full stretch to like flat foot, and I miss that peak contraction up at the top. And yeah, 5 times a week. And I actually don't know how many sets that is, but it's over 20 sets for sure. It's probably getting close to 30 sets on them. And yeah, some of those are just all to failure as well. When I do body weight stair calves, single leg, and I just take them all the way to failure, like 30 plus repetitions on that first set. It's actually really annoying to do it, but I do it and try and push through it.
I have a couple of things then, Steve. So first and foremost, in regards to the girth measurements, and I don't know how you feel about it, but I think that you are in agreement with me. I think that when it comes to client work, it's a different kind of story, because you want to have hopefully as many data points as possible that you can interpret to reduce the error of margin on different kind of with different kind of metrics. And also sometimes, depending on the level of experience of the athlete, one metric doesn't tell you the entire story. However, for someone like you, for example, Steve, you've been doing this since such a long time. You are so honed in on your routine, on your schedule, that nothing else is really changing. And then taking girth measurements doesn't really add more to the things that you don't know already. And in the end, for you, all that matters is that you are looking better because you're a bodybuilder. That's the ultimate thing. And because everything else is so static, all you need to care about is then the visual differences from maybe mesocycle to mesocycle, macrocycle to macrocycle, and girth measurements. While it would be interesting to see the development over years, once again, it doesn't really tell you anything that you don't know already based on the performance and also the visual representation of yours.
Yeah, on that note, I think it's a really good note that you made. Some of the people we work with are like less advanced, or they're holding more body fat. And so recomp is something that you could also experience. So I've had clients where theoretically it would look like they're maybe losing more than they should. You would expect them to be losing more body weight than they are on paper, like within the spreadsheet and tracking. So we look at more frequent waist measurements, and like the waist measurements coming down, but other measurements are like staying the same or even increasing. So you can see like that sometimes can be useful, but realistically for us, seeing body recomposition is like unlikely. So yeah, I agree with your statements there, like using the tool that's like appropriate for the person.
No, absolutely. And then in regards to the calf training, once again, because I've been playing around with lengthened partials myself as well, and I'm a big fan of doing calf raises on a leg press machine. So not a leg press, but leg press machine, because it's more convenient. Just sit on it, put that
horizontal one.
Exactly. Put just the normal, or adjust the weight on the stack, on the weight stack. You don't have to load it with plates and all that kind of stuff, you know? And I've been trying those lengthened partials, and it didn't really give me a good sensation or pump at all, for example. And I don't know whether I'm doing maybe something wrong in the partial range of motion, because I always feel amazing when I'm getting to that peak contraction, and especially because I have that 2-step movement in a calf raise. I'm coming up on my on the first part of my foot, and then I need to push it up a little bit more to really get that squeeze going. And I always have the feeling that it gives me something. It could be, of course, a false perception of mine. And I think that even might have talked about it at some point, that the best feeling you're getting in movements is often not in the lengthened partial position or so, but at the top end of the range of exactly on the squeeze. And that may not automatically mean that this is also giving you the best stimulus. So how does it feel for you when you're just doing the lengthened partials?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned where you're doing it as well, because I was using a 45-degree leg press for it because we don't have a horizontal one, unfortunately, which I probably wouldn't use the horizontal one for anything but calves, depending on the brand and how it was made.
Yeah, me too.
But those ones I think are normally pretty well set for calf raises. I haven't really done them that often on them, but anyway, I tried the leg press. I was like you said, actually this one you have to plate load and stuff, but it's not axial loading like a lot of other calf movements where you have to put it on the back. So I thought maybe it's a little bit less fatiguing, but I was using it and I was like, man, those short-term proxies, the pump disruption and everything was just way worse doing it on there versus I use this Watson like V squat thing. I was like, every time I use that V squat, I get the best sensation. So I just moved all of my calf training to that versus using the leg press. So I can't even necessarily, I don't know what my point is apart from, I guess I would ask, do you just find then when you do full ROM versus partials on the same leg press, you feel that you get more, if you were just disregarding like what you know about the data, you would feel like the full ROM is getting you more than what the lengthened partials are?
100%.
Yeah.
It's especially going from the mid part of the movement, so flat foot, up to the peak contraction, where I have the feeling that it gives me the most bang for my buck.
It's very interesting.
Instead of then the stretch itself.
Because, yeah, that's in like the one area. If you're going to be confident that lengthened partials are benefiting any muscle group, you've got to say it's calves, because like that lab of like Warnicki's lab have done so many studies on it, and the lengthened partials just beat out.
What has to be said though is everything on kind of knee flexion movements, especially especially squatting patterns, Smith machine squats or leg presses. It's crazy if you're not really locking out and you just come up and come down again into that stretched position. What that does to your quads, simply because I'm in a metabolite block right now, and because of that, the repetitions on the leg press, also due to my current knee issues, I am aiming for a much higher repetition range. And because of that, I was just playing a little bit around with more of a bro-ish style of like constant tension, and it's crazy. And also I have the feeling it just feels better from a stamina perspective. It doesn't really burn you out from a stamina perspective as much as if you were to take the set, I don't know, for 1/4 of the length more, because you're always kind of locking it out. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So are you doing like a soft lockout, or are you doing it like...
It's more like a soft lockout.
Okay.
So not completely locking out the knees, but already going pretty far up when it comes to the extension of the legs itself, and then coming down again. It's kind of like very much, if you really want to put a term on it, constant tension.
Yeah. So it's not like the ones have you seen me doing it where I come up nowhere near even. Yeah. So,
but just to elaborate a little bit more, so I can then see why it is then so hard. And if a movement like this, the way that I'm doing it right now, already gives me such a pump and such an accumulation of blob, I can definitely see why lengthened partials, the way that you're doing it, like very much just halfway, is feeling so exhaustive just in the given moment, and can possibly provide something.
Yeah, I was going to say with the stamina thing, because when this might be the difference between our experiences there, is when I'm going for just full range of motion, I lock out at the top, you get a little bit of time there where it's easy, you can get a breather, you can brace, and then come again. Whereas when you literally do it, where it's like you feel the tension dropping off and you come back down, literally that like 50% ROM, like, I don't know, I feel like the stamina is worse because you're just like, it's like constantly just like, fuck. You like have to keep going. And that's hard, but it is exactly like you said. In the moment, it seems very, it's quite stressful, fatiguing, challenging. But after the set's done, they're like, because people talk about, maybe the lengthened partials are giving you a better stimulus, but also maybe there's more fatigue cost too. I haven't really experienced that higher fatigue cost. And I don't necessarily think it's given me much more stimulus than full ROM on the leg press, but it's certainly after the set's done, it's like, oh, actually, that hasn't trashed me as much as I'd expect. But in the moment, you have to, like, if you are one of those people that think they don't already train hard on the leg press, like lengthened partials, you have to really push yourself to keep going.
No, I see that. I'm just also more so coming from a perspective of psychological demand, because the longer a set is, the more you need to stay in the zone and the more you need to stay concentrated. Whereas when you were to do something like the lengthened partials, well, yes, you're breathing heavily. You know that the set will probably also last you a little bit shorter. And by that, you just need to go up until the legs are kind of failing. Whereas when you take a set very, very long, you know it yourself. Sometimes you're questioning, like, do I have another rep in me or so? Right, and then you go another time. All right, that was all right. And if you were to do lengthened partials, you're just getting to the point where then the legs are in such an agony that you need to stop the set, I would assume.
Yeah, I can't imagine doing like, I don't know, more than 20 reps lengthened partial style. That would be pretty horrific on a leg press. Like, but even actually, that might be better than doing 20 plus reps full ROM style, because like you said, it's just like the set just lasts minutes, and that's just psychologically so fatiguing to just keep going, which is, I think, sometimes the arguments against those higher reps. And I mean, we see it in the literature where they're just more uncomfortable because people just get like psychologically worn out from having to keep going, so maybe they end the set sooner than they necessarily should. Have you been experimenting with the lengthened partials anywhere else? I know you're already doing it with your back work a little bit.
Yes, delts with lateral raises, because there has been a long time where sometimes I have the feeling that my delts, or my shoulders rather, are well lubricated and I can go through the entire range of motion. I've never been someone who's been capable of doing the full range of motion dumbbell lateral raises. There's always kind of an uncomfortable clicking in my shoulders, and that's why I don't really go there. And I've been just thinking, because it's something that I've experimented with some of my athletes, especially one of my athletes is going right now through a shoulder injury. And I've been saying, like, hey, then let's try the following. We're going for a higher repetition range alongside then only partials. So especially like lengthened partials. And see how that feels for you. And then he also reported back like, hey man, I had one of the greatest pumps that I've ever had in a long, long time for then my delts. And situations like these make you then question your own approach and make you then experiment a little bit more so yourself. The beauty is I'm having a very high frequency for my delts anyway, so you can throw in a little bit more experimentation. Let's just say you have only like 2 sets for an entire week. It's very hard to justify then experimenting too much. But if you're then training the delts like 4, 5, 6 times per week, go ahead, experiment a little bit, see how it feels for you, right? You're still providing a stimulus, and you can still go off by the ARIA approach and see and push it to the given ARIA for that session and provide very much a similar experience as well. And I've been just playing a little bit around with lengthened partials there and just partial range of motion in general on the delt movements, because I have so many exercises, or not exercises, but rather sets for the delts. I thought like, hey, especially on the D-handle, like crossover cable laterals, it always also there is kind of a little bit feels odd to me when I'm going too high up, also based on the positioning of my body. And when I'm just doing like partials, there feels great. Same goes for the machine lateral raises, for example. They never really felt great if I'm going the entire range of motion. I do remember the time when we've been to Dust Gym. There was this one machine, you know, where you're standing and then can basically go the entire range of motion. It felt so awful on my shoulder joints to go the entire range of motion. This was the perfect example for me, where I would need to just like do making partials on a machine like this, because it feels so much more natural to me. What's your take on this? What are your thoughts around these kind of observations?
Yeah, I think the first one in terms of like injuries is a great one. One of my clients at the moment, he's got an elbow injury, and I was like, this is the perfect opportunity. Like, so if he goes into full extension, he gets issues. So I'm like, well, with your tricep work, like just do the lengthened partial. Don't worry about locking it out. It probably doesn't matter that much anyway from the data that we're gathering. So like I think injury, like, and not being afraid to like change range of motion a little bit, because even when like, I guess lengthened partials are what in vogue right now, but Milo is always clear to say the difference between like a full ROM, like your range of motion, so long as it's not like tiny and you're not really doing anything, like the differences are pretty small between like, if people are like obsessed about getting muscles as long as possible and doing the partials, it's like you're not gaining that much more. Like it's marginal returns versus someone who's just doing full ROM. Like we've grown very well lifting the way we've been lifting for years. So I think that's also something to say is like, don't be afraid to modify your range of motion, especially if something feels comfortable in a certain range and uncomfortable in another range, even if, I don't know, data suggests something or you feel like you should do it a certain way. So your individual experience there is important, and not pushing through that discomfort is a very smart thing to do. And then lateral raises in general, I've been doing plenty of, well, like you could ask me where am I not doing lengthened partials at the moment would be a better question than asking me where I'm doing them, because I don't know if there's a muscle group that isn't doing any partials at the moment. I think everything is. So not that I still have full ROM and partials, like I'm not gone full.
Just an addition.
Yeah, exactly. For the most part, there are some where it's just a lengthened partial, but for that exercise, there's other exercises that are full ROM for that muscle. But yeah, lateral raise partials I like quite a lot of the time. And I don't know how much of it could even be attributed to, this is actually really interesting, the episode that I just recorded yesterday of Max Coleman. He was talking about deloads and how he wondered how many people are taking deloads at a time because they've noceboed themselves, because they hear experts and people suggesting you need a deload after like maybe 4 to 6 weeks, and they're like, oh yeah, so I'm really tired, like I need a deload. It's like, don't know, could I be noceboing myself for lengthened partials where I'm like, yeah, that feels better because, you know, they're the thing, which I don't mind. It's a nocebo, like that's not a negative thing, but I have to be aware of that.
Absolutely. Let's take a short break and then we will be back in a couple of seconds.
Do you not see the progress you would like? Are you sick of writing your own programs? Or perhaps you need some accountability in order to stick with a plan? Then it's time to start working with us. We at Revive Stronger offer a truly personalized coaching service. You'll get more than just an email with some macros or random cookie cutter program. With Revive Stronger, you will be the center of our attention. You will receive your own fully individualized training protocol alongside a customized nutritional strategy. We create the coaching around your needs, wants, personal preferences, and your own unique lifestyle. Every single week, we delve into your program in order to make appropriate adjustments so that we get the most out of your time and the best possible outcome. We help both female and male athletes to seriously change their body composition by adding more muscle mass and decreasing fat tissue. No matter if you're a competitive bodybuilder or just want to look better, if you need help with your progress and taking your physique to the next level, our coaching is for you. It's time to make a change. Sign up today and let's revive stronger.
To touch back on what it is that you just said about noceboing yourself into taking a deload. And that is something, it's funny because so much evidence has come out recently that we've been changing our stance on right before the evidence has come out, actually. And deloads is basically one of them, because I know that a couple of weeks back, we've started to be way more, I hate the term intuitive with it, but it is, I think, an appropriate term for very experienced athletes or very experienced people who have done nutrition, for example, right? And then it's the definition about intuition or intuitive, what it really means, right? But especially when it comes to deloads, to take more of a flexible and intuitive approach. And it's something that we have been doing as well. And it's funny then that more evidence is coming out to back that up. I'm not saying... But I think it's then easy. No, I think it's important then to be willing to change your stance on certain things when more evidence is coming out, because there have been lots of things also with range of motion, for example, when it comes to volume, right? Where we've been doing certain things in the past because we thought that for the time being, with the evidence that we had at that given time, and also, of course, the experience, which is evidence in itself, that this was the right thing to be doing. And then the more experience you gain, the more evidence is being presented to you from a scientific perspective, but also anecdotal perspective, you're then maybe changing your stance or trying things out and realize for yourself that it's maybe then the better way to go about it. And I find it fascinating then that deloads come out and more evidence supports that as well, that deloads are still inherently beneficial, but at the same time, pre-planning them and always be adamant about like a deload needs to happen now simply goes against what it is that we've observed with our athletes, and also what the data now more and more suggests as well.
Yeah, I think it's, like you said, we've kind of been, like, I think if you too often, there's that middle ground of listening to what is happening in your body, what you're observing with clients, and kind of leaning into that a little bit, but whilst keeping an eye on the data and the literature, because, like, again, you can just get so set in your ways. Like full ROM, I was very adamant about, like, that's definitely the way to go. But like, if I just listened to my body, maybe I would have let myself on like a bent over row. Like I was trying to find excuses to use momentum to get it short and like to improve the SFR, and same with like dumbbell lateral raises. As you fatigue, if you keep it super strict, you leave so many reps. Or like lying leg curls, using like a bit of an explosive like concentric to get it short. It's like maybe that's just because you're finding out, and the data then refines it and it discovers and gives us a better answer and refines what we're doing to, I don't know, maybe a lengthened partial is appropriate in those instances. Or maybe like, again, allowing your range of motion range to be a bit wider than like just like full ROM, or you're out. And then same with like deloads, like where like you go through it and you're like, man, like it just feels wrong to like take it here. Or you've been good at this with the diet breaks, where it's like, you're like, man, it just doesn't at this time feel right to just take a diet break. And I'd always sided on just like, oh, like there's no downsides and whatever. And it's like, yeah, but am I just basing that off, I don't know, what you hear out in the field as being the way to go about things? Or are you thinking and applying it to the client as an individual? And I always like to think I did that, but it's with the new data that's coming out, it's just like reaffirming some of those thoughts, where it's like, don't be so like to the book. You need to really take into consideration what's happening in front of you, for sure.
No, absolutely. And I found it very interesting, and people will of course listen, or hopefully listen to that episode with Max as well, that he then said the one thing that we are always saying as well, of earning basically the deload. If you do that, then take it when it presents itself to you, or sometimes take it when life kind of forces you to do or take it, even though that you're not fully overreached. Sometimes it's a smart thing to be doing, because it is of course then a part where you are not training as much or not at all. And also this kind of confirmed my biases, because ever since a longer time now, I'm even more so in the camp of like maybe no training to very little training in a deload. There's basically no client of mine anymore who does a full week of training in a deload anymore. It's more like up to 2 sessions, sometimes 3 sessions in very rare instances, or no training whatsoever. And also there, kind of Max kind of confirmed my biases, which I'm of course very happy about, because then it just confirms that you're not completely walking around blindly as a coach, but you're making the right observations. And sometimes you're not. That's of course also, I'm not saying that we aren't without faults or anything like this, but it's great then to be confirmed in your approaches as a coach, and also as an athlete as well, that what it is that you're seeing and what it is that you're adapting to is basically also then being aligned with maybe the scientific evidence as well.
Yeah, it's and bringing it back to like people who are talking about this study, Menno makes me laugh because I love him. But like, if you just read that he shared the paper and his interpretations of it and everything, which we talked about as well, and I can't remember exactly what he posted. His title of like, it was basically something along the lines of like, deloads are worse for hypertrophy. It wasn't quite that. It was like something along those lines. It was like, man, that's not what this study said actually. Like when you look at it, I know he had his own, I don't know, statisticians look at it and pull out some data that suggested the people who didn't deload grew more, but Max didn't find that, and that wasn't written about in the paper. It was like one group trained like 8 weeks and they had a week in between those 2 4-week blocks. One group trained 9 weeks full stop and they grew the same pretty much. It's like, hey, actually, like that was when I first read it. I was like, hey, you can take a week off in between 2 4-week blocks and not grow any worse. It's like, but not many people took that from the paper. And it's like you said there, if you need to take a few days off, or if you have a week that's just in the middle of a block and it's off, it's like, well, like it probably isn't going to mean much worse muscle growth. Like in this short-term paper, at least it showed here, I wouldn't be super concerned about it. So that was interesting to see people's takes, but the comment I made on Menno's post was like using the tool at an appropriate time, because it's similar with the diet break studies that have come out. It's like, hey, those people probably didn't need a diet break. So it's no wonder they didn't really see a benefit from it. Similar in this situation, the people, when you interviewed them, they hadn't earned their deload. They didn't feel ready to deload. They felt good to keep training. Even the people after 9 weeks of training hard, and they trained hard, like they still felt like they could keep going. So it's like, use the tool at the appropriate time. Don't just like inject it randomly. Like you said, you earn your deload, earn your diet break, that sort of thing. The thing that I'm left with still though, is this situation of, if you're taking a deload or days off and you're dieting, still having a calorie deficit during that period of time where either you're having days off or you're not really training very hard, if that's any sort of length of time, what risk of muscle loss is there in that week? I don't know, but I'm thinking like you're not promoting muscle protein synthesis from like you're promoting muscle protein breakdown from a deficit perspective, but also you're not promoting like the synthesis side from a training perspective. So then like, what do you do in that situation? Like you're kind of forced into, you need to have some maintenance days when you're just taking complete time off for an extended time. So is it just, we can truncate that? Like Max said, like take 3 or 4 days off. That probably risk is way lower than taking like double that time off. And so then you don't have to worry about your diet as much. I don't know if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question to ask. And hopefully someone like Max or someone else, I don't know, Dr. Pack or someone, goes down that rabbit hole and takes a look at that as well, because that would be very interesting. Because I've been so often already in that position with then athletes of in an ambivalent state of like, no, we can easily diet through it, because I have, of course, not seen any kind of harm to it, because we're only talking about a couple of days up to a week of a deload. But we are also talking about such, we can't really measure it. It's just an observation of ours, and our eyes are quite misleading when it comes to physical changes. We can't detect minimalistic or minimal muscle loss or muscle mass gain or so. We can't. And that's also why I have such a big problem with people misleading others, saying like after a month of a gaining phase, comparing pictures, see, I've gained like 5 pounds here. No, this is probably water tissue, fat tissue, maybe a little bit of cell swelling, but this has very little to do with muscle mass gain. And I would be very, very interested in whether there are some kind of detriments from a muscle mass perspective, and you are basically shooting yourself in the foot in that you're keeping a caloric deficit, and by that kind of breaking down some of the muscle tissue that you've built in the mesocycle, and always going kind of 3-4 steps forward, 1 step back, right? And if you could mitigate that muscle loss process, could we be better off than in the long term? I think it's a very, very interesting question. And I have my, of course, biases towards that, but I have no real fundamental basis to base it off from when it comes to these kind of claims and thoughts that I have.
Yeah, it's exactly that. It's like you like the one situation could be you take days at maintenance during that deload, and that maintains more muscle mass and buys you more recovery so that you can train harder and maintain muscle throughout the diet better. And you get that kind of, okay, you lose some days dieting, but you maintain more muscle, and that's a pro because you can just diet for a bit longer and maintain all the muscle and get all the fat off. Or you have a situation of you take those days at maintenance, you lose that time where you could have been potentially losing some fat, and it doesn't impact like muscle retention or performance particularly, and you've just extended the diet longer than it needs to be. And the way I, at the least at the moment, my best guess is people who are fatter, who have been dieting less time, less of a concern about taking days at maintenance. People who have been dieting more time, leaner, probably more concern about muscle loss, so more days potentially at maintenance during those deload periods. And so you're kind of like periodizing your deload and diet break time in accordance with kind of the amount of fatigue that they've accumulated on those ends, and also the amount of body fat that they have. So deload, diet breaks become, and refeeds are tools that become more helpful in more aggressive situations, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And yeah, very interesting question to raise.
I want to see some data on it, but I don't know how how important is that in the world of the world.
But again, what it all boils down to, and to kind of give concluding thoughts around kind of also that new study about deloads, and the same goes for then the intensity study that has come out from Zach and all. I think what it once again boils down to is time and intensity in the gym. If you take off those boxes, having sometimes a deload that is maybe suboptimal on paper when it comes to the scientific evidence doesn't really matter, right? Same goes then, as long as you bring the right intensity, whether you're doing one set more or less probably doesn't really make that much of a difference over the long term as well. Same goes then for the lengthened partials and all that kind of stuff. And with more experience, I think that you can gauge things a little bit better in regards to your progress, what feels great to you, what works for you, what doesn't. And you can then be a little bit more relaxed with the entire approach. At least that's the case for me. I've said it a couple of times. I'm the most relaxed when it comes to my training and also nutrition that I've ever been. And I'm yet making the best progress as well.
The thought that comes to mind is there's many ways to skim a cat. Like, even when I'm thinking about that, the situation I described, I know one of the arguments before for like aggressive dieting, where even you potentially sacrifice some muscle, is, well, if you sacrifice a bit of muscle, but you lose the fat quicker, you can get back to gaining quicker. You can regain that muscle that you lost in no time, because muscle memory is a thing. And so it's like, does that potentially just equate? It's like however you do it, you try and optimize it. But so long as you're, like you said, you're doing some of the fundamental things right, like you're pushing hard, you're recovering, so long as you're not doing any stupid shit and you're not trying to make things too easy for yourself. It's similar with like the weighted vest in contest prep. Like, some people view that as like a hack. It's like, no, there's still costs involved with the weighted vest. Like, it still creates systemic fatigue. Every step is a little bit more challenging. I don't think you get like a satiety perspective, like gravitostat. I'm not sure that that's like hugely there. Like, there's just no easy way to get to stage, however you do it. Like, if you want an easier, like, you either truncate the time so that on average it's easier, maybe as a contest prep, or you make it shorter, but it's more aggressive. It's like, there's no like easy solution there. It's either longer and harder or shorter and harder, or sorry, longer and easier or shorter and harder, but equally they're like both hard approaches. So yeah, it's like you said, you can be quite relaxed, because as long as you're doing some of the fundamentals right, you're going to land there.
Yeah. And the irony is there as well that those with the least experience are most of the time seeking the most complex approaches. And those with the most experience are most of the time the ones who can also there gauge things a little bit better and prioritize and interpret the giving things of priority as well. And for the vast majority of listeners who haven't yet done this for a very long time, maybe they are at around 1 to 5 years of training experience, I can only just say, like, don't do the same mistake as at least I did, and probably you did as well, of overthinking things too much, interpreting too much into those small little hacks, tricks, and those kind of things, because that doesn't really make the pie itself. The pie itself is kind of just hitting the gym hard, whatever this means, with the right intensity, with the right intent, being mindful about that approach, because we have the proof. We have thousands of just bros, and that is not meant in a condescending manner. We have thousands of bros who are more jacked than the vast majority of other people out there, and they knew very little about training. They just brought the right fire, right? And yeah,
and that comes from us who have been told that we overcomplicate things.
Yeah,
I think for us at least, and a lot of the listeners, like, we probably from the outside in, even our basics look fairly complicated, like specificity, overload, progressive overload, fatigue management. But those are like the big fundamental basics, and don't need to get, like, when you start getting super nuanced into, like, again, periodization, we'll talk about that. And I think there is some elements of periodization that make sense, basically planning. But when you start to think about it from like I boil down periodization to like what feels good in the moment, remove what doesn't feel good, put things in that do feel good, like SFR basically. But if you start going into like strict, like, I don't know, the term I would say is like phase potentiation, I'm not sure, like, that can have a logical theoretical basis, but I'm not sure we have like data that supports that that's truly what's going on here. And so, like, just going by feel sometimes in addition to like following the data and what we know about things, can guide you a bit better than like strictly following one or the other, if that makes sense, which is where we try and come from.
Yeah. At one point, we brought up the example about I don't know each and every single element of a car in order to drive a car. I don't need that, of course, right? And you can even boil it more so down, that example of like there are engineers who are then building the entire engine, for example, right? And then you have the mechanics. Some mechanics know how the engine is being put together, but most of them may not, right? But they know how to fix certain parts on the car as well. They know more than the vast majority of people out there, but not the ins and outs. And then once again, the engineers may be the researchers who are then discovering things, putting things together, making sense of things. And then you have the people, the consumers, who just drive the car, right? And then you can chuck it up. You have the athletes who just lift and want to get better. You have the coaches who are very much educated and help people fix certain things. And then you have the researchers who may be lifting as well, who are really delving deep down the rabbit hole. And you don't have to be a researcher. You don't have to think about how the engine is being put together in order to make proper progress. And you don't even have to be a mechanic and think about certain variables there and how to build the best program possible in order to make the best progress for yourself.
Yeah, and I actually was speaking to someone about a potential podcast episode where he was talking about lengthened partials and how like sometimes the bros just intuitively did things that now we're seeing out in research. And that's almost what Brad does at his lab, is like test what the bros were doing in the past. Was it a thumbs up or was it a thumbs down? And you could do an episode on like, what did they do in the past that now we have science to confirm was right, and maybe we have science to confirm wasn't right? Or it's like the old tilapia thins the skin. It's like, well, no, it's a high protein source of low fat content, and so it's probably very diet friendly. So it's not like tilapia thin the skin, it was just a very good diet food to have within like your program. So it's like trying to decipher why that worked. So it's not like you needed momentum to get benefits from rowing, but it's like, hey, they wanted to keep getting reps in the lengthened position, so to continue getting full ROM they use momentum, that sort of stuff. So that's where the two kind of come together and help aid our vision moving forward. And I think a lot of people get, and I used to be this way, where I don't know, you'd see different people having different methods and get like really confused by it and be like a bit stressed by it, like who's right, who's best. It's like that actually should be a bit stress relieving and be like, oh, there's so many ways that I could go about this. And that's where experimentation comes in. Find what suits your psychology, physiology, and then move forward with it and listen to your own feedback moving forward as well.
No, absolutely. I think it's a perfect time to then end the show here today. Very well wrapped up, I think, Steve. Have anything else to say, or are you fine with ending the show now?
Just because we got so much anime love last time, I'm going to show off my poster over here, which I doubt many people can actually see it.
It's hard to see what it is, but feel free to actually talk about it.
It's Attack on Titan. It's a piece of artwork from a tattoo artist who I would love a piece from, but I failed to get in his books this last time. I'm not sure why, but he's very sought after. So yeah, it's just a piece of artwork from him. So yeah, I'm pretty much filled this office now. Like I've got like all my different like things that I like in here. Yeah. I need more space to like expand.
So that you can have like a life tall statue in your building as well.
Yeah,
I've seen those garden, like maybe like a robot Goku, or so.
Just like a robot, that'd be intense. But yeah, that's the only thing I know. I have nothing interesting to say. Actually, I'm excited for, on the note of you being topless, I should be getting a portable aircon unit delivered tomorrow. So really? I'll report on how that is, because man, I can't sleep when it's hot. No. So I was just like, fuck this shit, I'm getting one.
I was always hesitant in getting one because I heard that the portable ones are supposed to be super loud and not doing that great of a job. So
the reviews are mixed.
Yeah, let me know how it is, because then I'm more tempted to actually then give it a try myself, because based on your recommendation, I got myself a Ring doorbell, which is all right. It has its ups and downs. For example, the subscription-based model that they have, I freaking hate it. And because of that, you're quite limited in the things that you can do. So for example, it doesn't really record the motion detection anymore, which is a bummer because then you don't know who was actually sneaking around in the middle of the night around your doorbell, you know?
You don't want to know.
No, I once had a spider walking when I had the 30-day testing period. I saw a notification like in the middle of the night. I was just like, what is that? Clicked on the video and it was a spider walking over the camera itself.
We get snails all over it. Actually, it's weird. But ours picks up like people just walking across the street or cars. So even like I'm kind of glad we don't have that subscription. But it would have been helpful. Well, it wouldn't have mattered. Someone stole something from the front door. And even if it caught their face, the police probably wouldn't really care too much about it because it's like it's so insignificant. But I like that someone can ring, I can look at it, and I can choose to ignore them if I need to.
Fuck off. Yeah. I just like because I'm my office is on the second floor, and walking down, often they actually left already when I'm downstairs, and this way I can just like pick up the phone, be like, hey, I'm upstairs, just leave the package at the doorstep or so.
Is handy. So yeah, I'll update people on how the aircon is. I listen to white noise at night anyway, so I'm not too concerned about the noise. But if it can make the room cool, I'm sold on it.
Yeah.
The only other downside is they look ugly and they have a pipe that goes out the window. So,
but maybe it's your entry level into getting a proper AC then. That you can or that someone really installs, because that's something that I've said to myself over the past years. In the wintertime, I'm getting someone to actually then install it when the time comes, because in the summertime everyone is probably fully booked out and you can't really get your hands on one, and each and every single year passes and I'm not doing it, and every single time the summer comes around I'm just like, oh, like as you can see here, melting away in my office.
That's exactly the idea. I was like, I can't get one installed anytime quick. The heat wave's coming. We've already had like basically a bit of a heat wave. I was like, let's get this portable one. Then we can always get one installed up there, and then I can have the portable one maybe in here, although I don't know where it would exactly go, but maybe I can make it work. So yeah, I'm excited for that and some good night's sleep. And actually even the... I don't know if is your diet kicking off relatively soon after this block?
Yes, absolutely. I will probably start at the beginning of July so that it then also ends with the wedding. And after that, we will be traveling to Mallorca. It was more like a spontaneous thing because we never really planned any kind of honeymoon. But then we thought like, hey, I took some time off. I planned on taking some time off, which I totally forgot about, but it was already scheduled in the calendar. And then I was just like, hey, then let's book a trip that is actually something, because I always wanted to avoid traveling further distances with smaller kids. I myself, I hate it when there's a baby crying on a plane, unless it's absolutely mandatory because you are traveling back home. I'm just like, why do you need to catch a plane with a baby? And that's why I always avoided it, for the sake or respect for other people, right? I wanted to just like, I don't know, care about others, right? This is where I'm coming from.
Fuck them. You've had to deal with it.
No. And this time, though, the kids are now at 4 and 7 years old, and I think that they are now ready to actually jump on board and, travel somewhere, especially for Tony. It would be the first time flying. And I thought, because it's also then the honeymoon, let's get something proper, because normally we are always holding a little bit back and spending money. And this time we actually got a freaking beautiful place, and I'm already looking so much forward to it, with a pool somewhere in the mountains, and you could still have a view onto the seaside, and I'm so much looking forward to that. So much. And this is kind of a combination of then honeymoon. Hugo is actually then going to school afterwards as well. So it's kind of like a celebratory event for many, many different things.
Sounds amazing. Whenever we talk about holidays, I'm always like, we should take holidays more often.
Yeah, and the thing is, people know that I'm coming from a background where my family didn't really have a lot of money. And I've never been like more south than Ibiza. And Ibiza was only because I was working there for 2 days. So it wasn't really a holiday. So for me, personally, we never took holidays. I never flew up until the age of, I think it must have been 17, 18 or 19, somewhere around there. And that was the first time when I've traveled to London, Steve, with my friends over New Year's. That was the first time that I was flying with Ryanair. Never before was I flying, right? And for me personally, these things are special because I've never really been in an environment like this. I would love to also then see something like, I don't know, South Africa, for example. I can't imagine
Safari.
what it's like. Exactly. Something like this, or just traveling around, because I've never had it in my entire life. And I had friends, of course, in the past, and when I was going to school, that always came back after the summer holidays, talking about where they went, right? Traveled there, traveled to Tenerife and all that kind of stuff. And I was always there. I was at home, right? And for me, it's something truly special in discovering these kind of things, experiencing these kind of things, because I've never been to places like these before, and I've never experienced something like this.
You will like a podcast talking about the Modern Wisdom podcast again by Bill Perkins. He talks about basically ending your life with no money. So like making use of your money, because I think especially for someone like yourself, Pascal, who's like always been on the side of saving, I'm quite similar in that regard as well. I'm always like, I need it later on. I don't know, this person will need it or whatever it might be. It's like he made some good points in that episode, and I might buy his book as well, because I think it's useful to think about.
Isn't it called something like Die Broke or something like this? I don't know this guy, but I've heard similar stories that people recommend. You actually want to die broke. Of course, not leaving any kind of debt for you or for your kids or something like this. And hopefully also giving something to them. But at the same time, for you, what it is that you need, you don't want to die with a lot of your on your bank account that doesn't go to your spouses and stuff.
Yeah, because there was one point where, and I see it with my dad now, where he's accumulated this wealth, and like I'm just like, man, just spend it. Don't save. Like I'm like in a financially fine position. I don't need you to save this wealth for me. Like, I don't know, you're going to be 90 and I'm going to be like whatever, like a full grown adult with my own like savings and wealth. Like I don't need a ton from you at this stage. Like use it now, like enjoy it now type of thing. You know what I mean? Yeah. Anyway, I think he makes some interesting points there for people like us, particularly who are like chronic savers.
Yeah, we can talk about a little bit more about it here next time, because I find it very interesting to talk about something like this. Yeah. And yeah, guys, so thank you very much for tuning in. As always, leave a comment. You did it very well the last time.
I did.
Right? And someone like Jeffrey, not Jeffrey. Jeffrey even said hi. Hi, Jeff. And thank you very much. It's always appreciated if you're leaving some comments below, no matter what it is. And leave a like, leave a subscribe, of course, if you're not subscribed already. Head over to Spotify as well and leave a rating there, because it has died down of kind of rating the podcast. And something like this is always very, very helpful. And other than that, I guess I'll speak to you guys next week. Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Losing weight fast while maintaining muscle mass. Sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? It isn't though. It's reality, and we know how to do it, and we will help you achieve this. The Minicut Movement is an 8-week fat loss program to make you lose a huge chunk of fat while maintaining muscle mass at the same time. We will support you from the beginning to the end so that you see the results you would like to and come out of it much stronger. You'll receive a fully automated spreadsheet that is based on your nutritional needs. You can choose between 6 different male and female training templates. Over 30 videos will guide you through each and every single step of the Minicut so that you're getting the most out of your journey and that you always know what to do. But the best thing is that you can start whenever you want. The Minicut Movement is open 24/7. So if you want to learn more or you're ready to sign up, hit the link in the description below. So let's revive stronger together.